Let's move from one massive sci-fi property to another. Let's get into our Dune review. Tyler's got the book. My book's on my iPad.
I have it on my phone.
I have it on Kindle as well as in paperback.
I actually have the paperback as well. I actually bought the 3 books because they are available for $10 on Amazon. I was like,
oh, nice.
I'll get that.
I finally made the decision that I am going to read Messiah, and I've added it to my Amazon cart.
Nice.
To be purchased soon.
Need to finish the actual Dune book.
Well, we're not here to review the book. We're here to review the movie.
Goodness. Thought I was gonna have to lie on my review
about having read it.
The ending of Dune was crazy.
So this is Warner Brothers' latest production. I say production release. It was done a year ago. Obviously had its release date pushed because of COVID, and directed by Denis Villeneuve.
That's my guy.
He is a fantastic director. He remains a fantastic director in Dune. What are your guys' initial kind of spoiler-free Twitter thoughts?
Oh man, I wrote mine out. I'm excited to read it, but I want to hear your guys' first.
All right. So, woof. Nailed the table. So after me and Tyler, or
who am I?
You're not Tyler. I know that. Me and Brett, we saw it together on the opening night.
Yeah, Thursday night.
And you asked me, what is your just gut reaction to it? And I was like, I really enjoyed it. Man, I could not stop thinking about this dang movie, and I'm just at the point where I just love it. And I watched it again on HBO Max, and I think it's incredible.
Yeah, so I think that this movie does a lot of legwork for a franchise. At a bit of a detriment to its own existence, but that said, it's still wonderful. It's gorgeous. The acting is great. It just doesn't really have anywhere to go because it's doing all the hard work of setting up this world.
Mm-hmm.
It's setting up things that are going to be paid off in a part 2, which is great when part 2 comes out. But it just left me wanting more in a unsatisfied way. Mm-hmm. Like I wasn't quite satisfied with what I got, but I know dessert is the next, my meal was okay, and I'm excited for dessert because it's going to be
You know why
fantastic.
It was so good? Because it wasn't soup.
But I really enjoy it. I'm a big sci-fi guy. I rewatched it as well on HBO Max after seeing it in theater, and I did enjoy it a lot more the second time. I think having those expectations kind of in check, knowing what I was getting, I could kind of just sit back and really soak it in.
And I think it's just a thing with sci-fi for me. I'll watch it and I'll be like, man, that was really good. I'll watch it again and be like, well, that was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Watch it 3rd time and now it's my favorite movie. Like Interstellar. First time I saw a movie in theaters, I was like, that movie was really good. And that is my favorite movie now.
Nice.
Like, just every time you watch it, it gets better. And I feel like that's a trend with sci-fi, at least with me. It's because there's usually more to a sci-fi than what you're just looking at.
Sure. Tyler, you are the resident Dune head. I don't know.
Yeah.
The Dune boy.
I like.
Yes.
I like the Dune. Call me the Dune bot. No, so I actually wrote out my tweet, but never tweeted it. Dune is one of the best book adaptations I've ever seen. It really nails what makes Dune great while being a visual feast that feels equally as epic as it looks. This is why we see movies in theaters.
Yeah, but like...
Beautiful. Well written. Beautiful.
So that's where the first book ends?
No. And tell me how the previous 2 iterations of this book as one series
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Just
you're
curious.
Not wrong. Your wording. It was your wording I was getting at.
Hey, for where it stopped, and where it
And that's
starts
true. I
up to that
don't
point in
I
the
don't
book,
know
it's
what's
adapted
coming
really
next
well.
in terms of like what is actually in the book. I've seen the David Lynch movie, so I have an idea, but I didn't ever go into like what's the differences between David Lynch and the novel.
So I
And
think
I don't want to know. Oh, excuse me. I don't really want to know. I'm fine
my
going in
biggest complaint
blind.
about the book is the end of it feels really rushed.
Mm,
And what the movie does really well is it sets it up to be able to flesh out the end of the book because they go just past halfway.
okay.
They're like, okay, look, now we can really show you the epic scale of what's to come. Because the book, it's like it builds and builds and builds, it builds, it builds, and then it ends. It's just like boom, it's over, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I guess the story's over now. Whereas the movie, what they've done now is they've aligned themselves in a way that they can really kind of give you this epic conclusion to what Dune has been building toward. And so that's I think what excites me so much is because I know like what I missed in the book I'm going to get on screen, and I just think that's honestly more exciting than it would be to have to read another book.
If this movie, hypothetically, if a second one doesn't get made and this movie has to stand on its own, are we still is it is that I don't know if it's fair to do to judge it on its own when it's intended to be a two-parter, but is it one that you'd go back and be like, "Yeah, I'd rewatch that."
Yeah,
You think so?
I would.
I think it would hurt
It would
it.
hurt the
No,
movie though.
just knowing
Yes.
that like, man, there's supposed to be more to this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But on its own, I still feel like it's an incredible watch, and it is a lot of world building and setup and figuring out who the characters are and showing you what is what is this planet we're on.
Right.
But even in there, there's still a little arc for Paul, which I think is really cool. So at least I'd get that satisfaction.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
guys
I
are,
think
oh, go ahead.
I would kind of be a little. I would be disappointed if they don't complete this, because I do think part of what I think makes me like this so much is that I know they've left a lot of meat on the bone,
Yeah.
right? Like they've
Same.
left this huge thing that they're building towards, and if they don't finish it, I will always be asking myself what could have been. And I think that would eventually leave a pretty sour taste in my mouth. But for all intents and purposes, Dune Part 1, I'll call it, to me is a good movie on its own merits. So I would rewatch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can just rewatch it to look at it.
Well, speaking of visuals,
Like
Oh,
a music
what are some
video.
pros?
That's my number one pro. I have visuals, but then I have, in parentheses, special effects, cinematography and lighting, production, costumes. It's just,
Good.
it's all like there. And like for the sets and stuff, they did a lot of it real. Like they actually went to the desert or they actually made those buildings that they're in. But then they pair it with these visual effects on a massive scale, and it's just so beautifully mixed. And I just,
Yeah.
man, when we were especially in IMAX or just in theaters, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. There's even one time, I don't know if you heard of me or not, but there's like an explosion and there's a thopter in front of it and it silhouettes it and the God rays come through and I was just like, oh. Like I vocalized out loud. It was just so pretty.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You mentioned lighting. The majority of this movie takes place on a desert planet that's all one color, and that doesn't work unless you understand how to film and really use lighting to your advantage. And I think they do a really good job of using lighting to highlight Arrakis.
It is kind of unfortunate that my favorite lit scene in the entire thing actually happens on Caladan. So when the Bene Gesserit shows up and they're walking through the rain and the light is, you get the landscape view of it. Oh, the music. Oh, I want to watch it now.
Yeah, I think my top two pros I wrote were this feels like an epic.
Yeah.
This feels to me like how I felt watching Fellowship the first time. This feels huge, and visually and atmospherically, this is one of the prettiest and most impressive movies I've seen. And then I also have costuming but Luke ran the gamut on all the production things.
Oh, you know how I do it.
I think this will probably get some Oscar nods for costuming because it's pretty impressive.
Who was your guys' favorite performance?
Rebecca Ferguson.
Same.
Rebecca Ferguson was my favorite, but I have to say how impressed I was with Jason Momoa.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the dude you see as Drago and Aquaman. You just always see him, and he was great. I thought he did fantastic. He didn't just kind of play himself.
He was the one casting when I saw this cast come out that I was just like, ugh, no, not Duncan. Like, not Duncan, Idaho. Really? Like, that's who you're going to cast for it? And honestly, I agree, Luke. He did not take away from the role. He did not diminish that character in any way. Honestly, I thought he did a really good job. I thought he brought a lot of heart to the movie. Because what his character does for the movie, I should clarify, Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, could not tell you, like, humor could punch him in the throat and he wouldn't know what humor was. Like, there's not humor in Dune. It just doesn't exist. And Momoa's character really brings some levity to the movie, and I think Dune needs that because the desert is a very bleak place. Like, this movie could be very, very bleak without a character like Duncan, played by Momoa. And so he really breaks up some of that, and I think he ends up actually standing out to me.
Yeah, he's necessary. I say necessary. I think to Paul, he's that confidant that his parents for some reason can't be. Like, but he has very intimate moments, with each of his parents in terms of having a very real conversations. But you see Paul kind of break out of that, like, I'm a prince or a son of a duke, like, shell whenever he sees Duncan, and it's just this breath of fresh air, and it does kind of liven up the movie a little bit.
I always like he always runs up to him.
Yeah.
Like, definitely breaking some type of protocol.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rebecca Ferguson, I think, is definitely the best performer. She's fantastic. Everybody's fantastic.
I would say,
mean, it's not fair if we don't mention somebody.
Yeah, everybody's really good.
They're all great together. It's like, I love the chemistry in between Rebecca Ferguson and Timothée Chalamet, and then Timothée Chalamet and Oscar Isaac, Timothée Chalamet and Duncan, or Jason Momoa. Like, they just all played so well off of each other.
Yeah.
The light reflects into your eyes sometimes, and you kind of look Fremen. Is it your eyes turn blue?
I got very blue eyes. I got that spice.
Spice.
Yeah. Luke, I think you mentioned the soundtrack earlier.
Yeah, briefly.
It's very, very good. I didn't notice the Hans Zimmer-isms in it, which was
this
nice.
is his best soundtrack
in a long time.
Probably since Interstellar. I think it's his most...
Interstellar before Man of Steel?
After. Interstellar's 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is one of his more reserved, maybe. Like you said, it's not full of, oh, that's a Hans Zimmer thing, right?
Yeah.
And he's able to play in the world and not play in Hans Zimmer's sandbox, which I really like.
Yeah. I want to specifically point out the percussion in this movie is some of my favorite sound in anything I think I've ever watched as well. The percussion choices in this movie are just amazing. Zimmer did such a good job with it. I was very, very pleased.
I feel like they don't do it very much.
Your chair broken?
Probably. I feel like they don't do it a whole lot in extras for Blu-rays and 4Ks, but I'd love to see one for how they made the soundtrack. Um,
Zimmer typically puts his sketchbook on his albums, though. So hopefully he puts this one out.
If at least on Apple Music, which is what I have, he has separate soundtracks of his sketchbooks.
Oh,
really?
For cool. Some of them, he started doing that.
I hope this one is out soon. I'd really like to hear the sketchbook for this.
It's been out because the movie's been out in other countries for like.
Is it on there? I haven't.
I don't know about Spotify, I guess, but.
No, I know the soundtrack's out, but I don't know if the sketchbook's on there.
It is, yeah.
Luke says yes.
I say yes.
Other pros, I thought that in terms of not having, I'm in this weird place where I have some knowledge of Dune, and it's very incomplete. But I felt like it did a great job of explaining things without being super monologue-y, and like I was able to follow everything. I didn't feel like I got that the Bene Gesserit were some witches things. Yeah. And we didn't need to go into super big detail on that. Like I could see them going further into it in a part 2.
They will.
But I didn't think that necessarily needed it, and there was lots of stuff like that. So, yes, Tyler, I see your hand raised.
The show that has been confirmed for this is about the Bene Gesserit.
Oh.
It's a prequel show that takes place prior to Paul's life about the Bene Gesserit creating Paul.
Oh.
Awesome.
So, is Charlotte Rampling, is that her name?
I don't know. But yes, that is her name. Rampling.
Charlotte Rampling, yeah. Man, she's...
I don't know.
In one scene in this movie, 1.5 scenes in this movie, her face is covered. Good grief, man. Talk about commanding.
Still act the crap out of that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But yeah, they'll dive more into that, Brett. I would agree with you, though. They do a really good job of kind of giving you the backstory without giving you the backstory.
Skarsgård. Is it it's
Stellan?
As
Stellan.
Our primary antagonist.
Gross. Looked gross. This little bubble bath.
He had fantastic prosthetics.
Yeah.
And just how he moved and how he talked, I kind of wanted to see more.
I really appreciated how I could understand him.
Despite this being such a long movie, you'll often hear me say, I just kind of wanted to see more.
Yeah, so actually the Baron is mentioned in my cons. Not because of the Baron, though, but because I'm with you, Brett. I think we needed more time with him. Other than I think the Harkonnens as a whole we needed more time with. I think they could really use some... Like Batista's character, right? Like, he's really important. Without spoiling things in the book, he's super duper important. And I think he has like 3 scenes and one throwaway line where Baron Harkonnen's like, "Hey, nephew," and you're like, "Oh,
they're related."
No, he
calls him uncle.
He's
a couple
super
times
important.
Too,
yeah, it's just like we don't get anything that really gives you a sense of who the Harkonnens can be, other than, oh, these guys are really menacing.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, they're really rich. Oh, hey, they're colluding with, blah 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 blah. But like, I don't know. I think we could have used more time.
I'm gonna jump off that, Tyler, to kind of go into one of my cons, which is that there doesn't. The conflict in this movie is I think it's not well set up. That's like you said with the Harkonnens. Like I there's one line about like, or 2 lines maybe, about how there's someone who's kind of trying to play all of them, but then like they're just kind of the bad guys because they're the bad guys and they want to stay rich. And there's not really like this. I wanted more drama between, Duke Leto and the Baron.
Yeah, there's not.
I didn't necessarily care. I wanted to. I didn't really care that they just came in and fought, right? Like there wasn't a reason. I didn't think there was a compelling reason for that conflict.
Well, the biggest thing this movie is missing is why is the Padishah working with the Harkonnens?
Yeah, the Empire, right? You say the Padishah. Sorry for
the Emperor. Yeah. Like we just know.
They talk about how he's afraid of House Atreides because they have a voice.
Yeah, like
why is he afraid of House? Oh, because of the voice thing.
Yeah.
I just
and because they have such a power, they have a really strong home planet. Like Kaladin is like very resourceful. They have everything they need, and they have like one of the best armies in the galaxy.
I'm trying not to spoil anything, but see, like I don't see any of that in the movie. I don't see them being powerful. I don't see them kind of being of these other houses, the leaders who could lead a revolution against the Empire. I don't see their army do something amazing. In fact, I see the opposite. And that's just a small con for me, is that I know that this story in particular isn't focused on that because it's trying to get Paul where he needs to be. It's a way more intimate story than the grand scale. But it did kind of feel like, oh, these are just chess pieces on a board, and I really just need to focus on this one. So there's a con from me.
Yeah, it didn't bother me.
It's a con that gets you to the right headspace, though.
Good.
It's the con that gets you where you need to be, because ultimately, yes, you're right. Like, we need a vehicle for the conflict to happen. We get that vehicle. But, it's not a Porsche. It's not a Lamborghini. It's a Ford Focus, right? It's just going to get you to where you need to go, and you're going to be happy with it.
But it's a Ford Focus driving through the Alps, and it's beautiful outside. Look out the windows, and it's like, oh, this is amazing.
I just think if you give us 2 or 3, maybe 4 more scenes, and maybe not even that, 2 or 3 more scenes with the Baron, just kind of explaining a little bit more of where they're coming from, I think that all goes away, honestly. Yeah. And it wouldn't shock me. I know we hate this. It wouldn't shock me if there's a 3-hour director's cut of this movie where we get those exact things. Same. Specifically, I don't want to spoil things, but there are certain characters who have motives that are kind of, you're just like, oh, okay, that's a thing. I think that stuff's a little more fleshed out in some scenes that were probably left on the cutting room floor. But all in all, it works. I don't need it. That's me being picky because I love this thing.
Sure.
Right. But I don't know. I don't need it.
Other cons, since we're there.
My only real con is mainly just IMAX related. The movie's really loud, and there's a lot of moments where the dialogue specifically, you can't hear it well. You have to really listen hard. And it's in one specific scene, really, which I think is one of the best scenes in the movie as well, which is the Ganja bar scene. And you get one of like the best monologues in the book. But you have to like listen so hard because there's just kind of going on behind it.
Yeah.
I think maybe just they need to turn down the woofer a bit in the IMAX. And it would be fine. Because on HBO Max, perfect. And I had mine cranked in my room because the movie sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
So just an IMAX con.
Yeah.
The first thing. So Dune was also like my first date night since having a kid. So
nice.
I'll be very happy about that moving forward. But the first thing Dana turns to me and says, when it ended, I can't wait to watch that with subtitles. I was like, yep.
Me and Brett were even talking about this before. I wish I could just watch movies with subtitles in theaters.
Like have the option. Yeah. Like maybe there's subtitled showings.
Yeah. I would jump on that so quick because I've just gotten used to it now that I prefer it. This makes it so much.
Agreed.
Yeah, all of my streaming services are set to have them on.
I feel like I've convinced my
I'm with you
family
there.
to do it too. Whenever I go and watch stuff at my parents' or my brother's house, the subtitles are on.
Yeah.
I will say though, on first viewings, I don't always have them on. It's just, I don't know. It
Yeah.
depends. Depends what I'm watching.
It depends what it is.
My other con, I guess, to get us back
Yeah.
to that, I do think there's it's kind of spoilery. But
Okay.
I'll wait.
Well, I'll do my last con, and then we can jump into spoilers. My last con, and I don't think it's spoilery, is the scale of the world, and I'm not talking specifically about when someone is standing in front of a giant spaceship. I'm talking about the players, and this is a space epic, and I felt like we were never that far off the ground. I didn't have any idea of how big the empire is. I don't know why I should be worried about the Harkonnens. Like, we only ever see the one city on Dune. It just didn't feel like the world was big outside of the composition of the shot, if that makes sense.
I get what
I
you're
wanted
saying.
a map. Show me a map. I don't know. Luke disagrees.
I don't really understand.
Here you go.
Yeah.
You wanted a map. That's just the basin.
There's the map. I guess nothing that happened in this film felt like it was on a galactic scale. In Star Wars, you see these like fleets, or there's this, I don't know, it has a different thing. Denny is very good at showing compositional scale. Like, there is this massive sandworm, or looking up during a fight scene and seeing some ships up. But I think that was the best. That was one of my favorite shots. There's a battle, and they pan up, and it's like you see
All them
all
flying
these
through the
ships
space tube.
flying through the space tube. That was awesome. I wanted more of something like that to give me a sense of scale. We don't see. I don't know. It's a little nitpick, I guess. It just didn't feel like this was that big of a world outside of the world itself.
I won't tell you to not have that as a con. The story of Dune is so singularly focused that I don't think it will ever feel that way. The scale in this is really told through the politics of the story. You have the emperors, you have the Harkonnens, the Sardaukar, the Fremen, the Atreides. You have all these houses and peoples. I think that's where you find your scale. You don't necessarily find it in. It's not this galaxy spanning
thing.
Swashbuckling adventure. It's this. People are fighting over one planet.
Mm-hmm.
So the scale really is the political part of the story, not necessarily the galaxy.
I need to rewatch it with kind of that viewpoint in mind.
That's just how I think of Dune. I mean, it's because this planet is kind of central to what everybody in the galaxy wants. So everybody's to capture this planet. And they're going to politics the crap out of it until they get it.
Well, cool. Let's give our ratings real quick, and then we can jump into some spoilers. Luke, what do you give this?
I'm going to give it a booyah. I really just love everything about it. And I think this is something that's more approachable in the sci-fi world, too. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that inspired Star Wars, and you can see that when you watch it.
Yeah.
There's even some shots in there where they show sandworm, and it's like, that looks exactly like Return of the Jedi Tatooine stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it everywhere. It's not gonna be that galactic thing you expect, but it's the political side of Star Wars, I
Mm.
would say, without the fantasy. No, with the fantasy. There's some fantasy in there.
We just haven't gotten a lot
Yeah.
of it yet.
Yeah, I've always heard Dune referred to as adult Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tyler, what's your rating?
I'd give it a fanboy worthy. Simply because I think what will make this a booyah is part 2.
Yeah.
See, that's why I gave it I was gonna give it a fanboy worthy at first too, but I'm trying to do it just based on the one. So
yeah,
it's kind of where I switched it.
Sure.
Yeah, I just have I think knowing the rest of the story makes it hard for me to not. Does that make sense? Like usually I'm really good at like separating the book from the movie,
Mhm.
but this book or this movie is so close to the book that it becomes really hard. Like it's really, really difficult. One of my pros, and I didn't mention it, but like this slightly trims some of the details of the book, but keeps the spirit.
Mhm.
Like they do a really good, like one of the things that they don't do in the movie that's in the books that is, I think, really awesome is the Chris knives.
Oh, yeah.
Once you unsheath the Chris knife, you can't sheath it until you spill blood with it.
Oh.
So like that's a small detail in the book that they don't put in the movie, right? But like you don't need that in the movie.
Right.
I feel like it's a part
just
that
like,
can come in part 2 because Paul doesn't really know that yet.
Mhm.
Maybe we haven't
True.
seen Paul learn that. He might know it.
Right. But like they trim the little details like that to really kind of trim the fat of the story, which I think is a really good move. But yeah, no,
They kind of
family
do show
worthy
it,
for
though.
me. In a way. They definitely sheath one though, without spilling blood.
How dare they? That in and of itself probably dumpster fire, right? Worthy of it? No.
I give it a fanboy worthy.
Tyler's giving it a fanboy worthy. I'm also gonna give it a fanboy worthy. I think that it is. It's weird. I think I want to give this a Matthew McConaughey.
Oh no, I don't. I want to give it a
I want to
booyah.
give it a Matthew McConaughey, but it is technically so incredibly made and so beautiful that it bumps it up to a like I approach this from a story perspective first, and I don't find the story that satisfying, but my gosh, is it a well-made movie in terms of just how gorgeous it is, how well it's acted, how well they get information across. And so I think that bumps it up to a fanboy worthy for me. So there's where I land.
I mean, if they tomorrow came out and said Dune Part 2 is not happening, this immediately goes to a booyah for me.
That's crazy. It would affect it the other way for me. I think without Dune 2 it gets worse.
I think without Dune 2, I let it stand on its own legs and I say, yep, it's a booyah for me. I enjoy
it
it
was
that
trying
much.
to do as a part 1. I can understand that. Yeah. Okay,
But
spoilers.
knowing where they're going, I'm so excited.